1950, I believe in 97 was the first season for it, and pretty much went whole hog no-till right about then, and apparently did a good enough job. He convinced the rest of the community they need to do that too.
The banker did say we could stay one more year, so we're accrediting part of that to no-till. Really want to thank Matt for the opportunity to assist in what he's doing. He came down here from South Dakota. Can you hear this? He came down here from South Dakota, I think in 93, is that correct?
94.
94, and we got acquainted early on. And he brought a lot of new concepts to our farm, among which was the no-till practices. And although he was consulting for us and we were still doing no-till, we began to introduce some no-till activity on this farm. And shortly after he came to Kansas, I've often told Dwayne back that he was one of the greatest assets to profitability and cash grain farming on the plains of any single person in the last 100 years. I really believe Matt is one of the greatest assets to farming on the plains here in Kansas in the last 30 years. He's just brought a lot of information to us. He works diligently on these projects. He's principal owner of the Exapta Corporation. All of their equipment is field tested from an agronomist perspective. Really appreciate Matt and what he's done for our farm.
Yeah, and Kent has done a tremendous job over the years. He's joking about his financial condition. He's tripled his farm size since I've known him, at least tripled, maybe a little more, almost quadrupled. And I think he's doing okay. He's pretty financially savvy. In addition, he's just a good operator. Yeah, my background is first and foremost, I'm an agronomist, crop consultant. That's how this whole thing came about. I started in 94 here and convinced people in Kansas not only should they no-till, but they should grow crops other than wheat. And needless to say, this crazy guy from South Dakota had a little bit of resistance, but a few people listened, and here we are today. The equipment always came later. Working he's also one of my consulting clients. I don't scout his fields, but I work with him by phone and email as I do with Ken. And Tom does the prototype work for us. I can't get a hold of Tom to talk about it. He calls me when he has a grounded question. Get that done. He's on to the next thing already.
Yeah.
But he runs a heck of an operation, and he's very detail oriented.
Thank you, Matt. I've known Matt for years. I really have no idea how long. Probably 15 years, something like that. And have consulted with each other for most of those years. I enjoy trying new and different things. I'm one of the very strange people that enjoy change, especially whenever it's fruitful. When you have the right change and you go about it with the right mindset, expecting to do better, then most of the time that's what you're going to end up getting. I've had some epic failures, but don't we all? That's where we learn the most. I do a lot of testing for Matt. We've got 2 or 3 different things on my drill right now, and a couple of different things on my planter. Years ago, I had started with a little 6-row back in '97. I went to a 12-row, and I never was satisfied with my planter performance. I just never was. Of course, we're talking about quite a few acres of no-till that were just new no-till. I went whole hog. 21 years ago, I sold everything I had and bought a 6-row planter and a little no-till drill. The next year I got an air cart. And I was absolutely going to make it work no matter what. And I thank God that I met Matt when I did, because so many of the little tweaks and things that you can do to a planter make all the difference in your stand. It's not one thing, but there's many, many, many different things that all need to be right. And if you get a half-inch of rain, you look brilliant. If half of those things can be totally off, get a half-inch of rain and it looks great. But during those times, whenever it's tough, like last year planting cotton, very, very difficult, because I was trying to plant it 1 inch deep to 1 1/4 inches, and it was really dry and fluffy on top. I was talking to Matt regularly, just trying to do that. Ended up with an amazing cotton crop last year. This year, I felt like we really had it dialed in when we were planting cotton and planting corn. But whenever you get 20-some inches of rain in May, it really didn't matter. So you might say, well, it's all on Mother Nature, but it's not. It's those marginal times, like the year before, whenever it was incredibly difficult planting. And for me this year, I planted 190 acres of hemp that's just now coming up. Incredibly difficult planting conditions to get a seed that's less than 1/4 inch deep and do it right, especially those little bitty seeds. So these little details that I've learned from Matt and from my own power of observation and trials over the years has really made the difference. And whenever we're in such tight margins, whenever you might spend a couple $100 a row, and that's so cheap to get those last 2 or 3 things right.
So, very pleased to have Tom here. He is, of all the farmers I know, and there's quite a few that I know, he is by far the most meticulous on seed placement of anybody. And it pays off. I mean, his yields are head and shoulders above anybody else in his area. And Tom's attention to detail carries all through his operation. It's a real joy to work with Tom. He asks these agronomy questions that are really hard. And sometimes I just tell him, hey, look, I don't know. I got to go research that for a while. So he challenges me, and it's been a great relationship. So moving on to some of the details here, we'll talk about planter setup. Now, how many people have Case IH planters? Okay, you're probably not going to like what I have to say, but I hope you're open-minded. If not, plug your ears. We're not going to talk much about Case IH planters. I kind of washed my hands of them years ago. Kent started with a Case planter. Would you ever go back to one?
Not at this point, but just isn't the after work of the tools that we need associated with the obviously feel like we could improve on performance versus
Did you hear that?
No.
Yeah.
Am I on?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'll just repeat it. He said no, not at this time. The attachments aren't there to make a case planter perform the way a deer planter does. I know Jerry Berger here started with a case planter too. Would you ever go back to one? Yeah. He says no. I spent a lot of time working with them in the mid-90s. My stance originally was, I believe, the company propaganda. It was ready for no-till, was the advertisement for the early riser in the early 90s. And I thought, maybe that's true. And so I approached it with that mindset that, hey, that's the one we need to work on, and we can really excel. And I came down here to Kansas, and there were these cycloplanters everywhere. They're okay for tillage. They did okay planting milo. They're a little more affordable than deer. So there were a lot of them to work on that we were trying to make work in no-till. And it was pretty frustrating trying to make them work right in no-till, because there was no seed firming. You couldn't mount a Keaton down in there very well. We tried mounting a Keaton. We tried doing different things with the V-type closing, choppy wheels, all those things. We couldn't get it to work right. I went so far, I had an elaborate firming and closing system all ready to go. It was out at Jerry Berger's writing up my notes to write the instructions, and we ran it one last time, and I was just horrified at the seed placement. And I abandoned it. The whole thing went on the scrap heap right then. Because what I discovered was the gauge wheels are so far forward in relation to the blades that all that sidewall is bubbling up and seeds are getting scattered all over. You don't have a well-defined furrow. So putting a Keaton on was actually detrimental, and actually seed placement was never going to be very good. Yeah, you can get a stand with them in no-till most of the time, especially if you've got a little moisture to work with. In dry soils, they can be more problematic. But you can never get them to work as well as Deere, Kinsey, white type openers. And it all comes down to the gauge wheel position in relation to that blade. And there's no way to fix that without re-engineering the whole opener. And actually, Case keeps making it worse because they keep going to bigger and bigger blade diameters. I think they're up to 16 now, all of which is making this worse because now the blade is even farther behind where the gauge wheel is resting. So the Deere and Kinsey gauge wheel position is absolutely perfect, spot on. I don't know if they knew what they were doing, but one way or another they got it right. And so I can hold that sidewall together, I can get the seed down to a very consistent depth. I got a well-defined furrow that I can run a seed firming mechanism down there where the seed is, which seems to be crucial in no-till and especially in these tougher soils down here. Now farther north, you get up into Canada, the Great Lakes area, it's not quite as critical. It's still an advantage to firm the seed down there, but it's not quite as critical. Here, if you don't firm the seed in the bottom of the furrow, you may not have a stand unless it rains right afterwards. So that's the long and the short of a case planter. I can't make them work any better than they are. You put a rebounder on there, that'll help a little. Some people have put different covering discs, flip the covering disc this way and that. I don't know. Suit yourself, but my dad would say you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, and that's kind of where we're at with the current case planter. And if that design was so wonderful, other companies would have adopted it by now. The patents have expired 20-some years ago. Nobody's adopted it. Case's market share of planters continues to decline, so there's more and more people agreeing with me that, hey, it's just not there. All right. Sorry to disappoint you guys. On the Deere, Kinsey, White, Harvest International planters, they all work about the same. On the setup, how many of you people run sideband fertilizer openers out in front? Nobody. Good for you. Jerry does. He didn't want to admit it. Kent used to up until this planter, and he really likes that sideband, but his comment to me was if he were 20 years younger, he would still be doing sideband. But it was just a decision he made to continue farming. Something had to go, and all that stopping and filling and dealing with sideband openers, just had to give it up. Is this accurate?
That's pretty much it. And plus, in the heavy residues, we just couldn't keep plugging out. We're out trying to sort that mess out continuously. And I called Matt one day and I said, how am I going to make these openers work? He said, as far as I know, you're the last guy in the world to still run them. I don't know why you don't take them off. That's kind of inconsistent in these recommendations. You got to take it with a grain of salt. Nevertheless, he convinced me that life would be a lot more pleasant if I just get rid of them. We did. We went 2 years without them. We've never plugged up since.
You probably couldn't hear that. He said he was having trouble plugging with the sideband openers, and part of that problem is he was running the Martin UMO, which I never liked that idea at all. I'm surprised he got along for as many years as he did without plugging. But
I put those in the same category as a filter that people run out in front. I remember Dwayne Beck said one time 15 years ago, I was listening to him speak on that. He said the problem with the reason that most guys can't take them off after they've tried them and ran them for a while is because their wives know how much they paid for them. So he said when you set them about 2 inches above the soil level, and you leave them on there for extra weight, and that's perfect. Well, I'd heard him say that, and I was planting that next spring back home, and I am literally right next to the road on this side, and my neighbor is right next to the road on the other side. Now, granted, I had been no-till 2 years longer than him, but it was still pretty early on. I was probably 5 or 6 years in. He was about 3 years in. We're on both sides, and he's going along. He keeps stopping, and I now have a fourth of my field planted. It was a quarter, and he keeps stopping over there, and I didn't know what was wrong. So I went over there. I thought maybe I can help this guy. What he was doing was cleaning all the mud out. He had all this mud. He was disturbing that out in front. Really, really heavy Lila clay soil, and it was all over and getting stuck on everything. So I went over and I helped him clean it up one time, and I said, you know how to set those? You don't have them set right. He said, God, something's wrong. I said, you got to set them about 2 inches out of the ground. And he got pissed off at me a little bit. He said, no. The number one guy in the area, custom planting guy, said I got to have these. So this was literally his first field he was trying to plant with the Coulters. So I couldn't talk it into him. He was pretty hard-headed, and he kept fighting it. I finished the field, and whenever I was leaving, his son was pulling out of the field with a flatbed full of these things. They'd finally taken them all off. And I don't see any need for those either. I don't. Matter of fact, I almost never even use row cleaners anymore. Very, very, very little. There are times in flooded ground where you might have some residue piles, stuff like that. So I got the little air cylinders so I can leave them up most of the time, and then I'll drop them down only rarely and occasionally where I need it. Or if I ran a lot of cattle and I feel like I've got some little hoof prints or some cow patties out there, I'll flip them out of the way and I'll run it really, really, really light, like right above the soil level, where if something up there, it hits it, it'll spin. Most of the time they're not spinning. Go ahead, I know you're going to get to that later, and I jump forward.
it's okay. Yeah, so for sideband openers, If you're going to run them, you do not want the row unit mounted ones. Those are terrible. We don't have enough downforce on the row unit anyway. You need the frame mounted ones. The deer ones are probably the least troublesome. But you got to, a lot of times you got to add extra ballast to the toolbar in this part of the world. You won't have enough down pressure. You won't have enough ballast to create all the down pressure you need on the row units. And when we do run them, we're videoing this, by the way. You guys said you didn't run sideband openers. You probably don't care, but somebody watching the video might want to know. If you're going to run those low disturbance openers, run them as shallow as you can, like an inch deep, shallower than the seed, and run them 4 or 5 inches away from the row. Otherwise, they'll mess up how the seed opener is performing. So, when I came to Kansas and started no-till, I was, telling everybody to set up their planters with sideband openers. That's a Dwayne Beck thing. He still preaches that. He curses me when I say, we can put the nitrogen on top. He is adamant that all the nitrogen needs to go below the surface, not only on crops going in with the planter, but with the drill too. He likes the mid-row banders. And I just got tired of arguing with them, and finally I just told them, I said, if you farmed in Kansas, you wouldn't run sideband openers either. We can't keep enough residue. So running these extra openers just to place fertilizer that rain could easily incorporate for us, it just didn't make any sense to be running all these extra openers. We have such a terrible time. We have a tough time with erosion. Those openers are creating more compaction, destroying residue. We have more runoff. There's every reason in the world to get rid of the darn things, in my opinion.
That's where you'll find your weeds too.
And definitely you have more weeds there. Not to mention it really slows down the planter. And this spring, you probably wouldn't have got done with corn on time this spring if you were putting all that sideband fertilizer on. He agrees, no. So, skip the sideband openers.
And they're expensive.
They are expensive.
They're expensive. And the maintenance is expensive. And there's more bearings. I don't understand the need for it. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt that you're more efficient putting nitrogen in the ground. It's going to be 5 to 10% more efficient. It's just the way it is. But do the calculations. For dry land, it makes no sense. You're applying 100 pounds of N, you got $3.50 worth of savings if you're 10% more efficient, or whatever the number comes out to be. You can't afford to run sideband openers for $3.50 an acre. Not even close. Especially if you figure the residue is worth anything at all, and it's worth a lot in terms of moisture savings later on. All right, so moving on to the seed opener itself, the thing that's out in front, the row cleaner. Tom started talking about that. We still run row cleaners. Even Tom's got shell-borne heads on his combines, which solves a tremendous amount of problems. But he still runs row cleaners. I know I have a lot of other clients who run shell-borns, and they still have the row cleaners on there. They don't do much most of the time. You can really, the wheels aren't even turning. That's where we like to set them. Just moving an occasional little bit of residue where the wind blew it into a pile the previous year, or it washed around and got concentrated. Just very, very minimal movement. As to which design of row cleaner you want, originally they were Howard Martin had the patent on the very first one, and it was those long straight fingers, which weren't bad. It wasn't a bad design. But we've moved beyond that now. The Yetter sharp tooth, which is what's on here, the wheel itself here is a Getter Shark Tooth. The bracket is John Deere, but it's made by Dawn. That Shark Tooth wheel is just hands down, it's the way to go for a row cleaner wheel. They can be plenty aggressive. That edge is sharp if you need to be aggressive, but they just have a lot less problems plugging and wrapping than those long straight fingers. And they're a little more controlled. They don't dig into the soil when you go over a terrace, that sort of thing. Now the bracket, you know, I think about everybody's gone to some sort of adjustment from the cab now. Am I right? You've either got like a Martin clean sweep up and down, or this is Dawn Air version. Dawn's got a hydraulic cylinder version too, but nobody has any hydraulics to spare, so Air is kind of the default. You know, you don't have to have that. It's nice. Anything easily adjusted gets adjusted more often. But we got by just fine. If you're kind of a low budget guy, we got by just fine with those old screw adjust stems. You can go along there and you can have them all adjusted in about a minute and a half, even on a 16 row. But, you know, that's a couple more acres you would have had planted if you were just in the cab and flicked the switch.
Ben is one of our guys here on the farm, and he used to do all the adjustment for us when we had manually adjusted row cleaners, and he was really good at it. But that on-the-go adjustment made us go to this air system. He didn't like the on-the-go adjustment of the row cleaners, and so we like this new system better. We don't even have to stop when we want to change the settings.
On what we've talked about so far?
I might add on the road cleaners, even though we just had incredible amounts of flooding, you know, the percentage of the field that actually has residue that I can't get a stand in without using the road cleaners is very, very, very small. I still use them maybe 1% of the time across the field. And I really don't know if I'll put them on my next planter. Maybe I should, but I use them so infrequently over the last 4 or 5 years. Probably about 5 years ago where I just all but quit using them. That I don't know if I can justify the cost. They are expensive for something that you're only going to use on 1% of your acre. I would much rather, I mean, if I get tight on money or something on my next planter, that's what I'll just leave it alone. I will.
So, just a quick question. We do a whole bunch of cover crops, and it's crazy on top of that.
Where are you? Where are you located? Right in this area?
North of Portland campus.
Okay, you're still south of 80 though, right? I-80. I would find
Repeat
that
the
hard to
question.
believe. I have
Tom,
incredible amounts of
Repeat the question, please.
The question was, where he is, he does a lot of cover crops, does a lot of grazing, and he has incredibly heavy residue, which is wonderful. It's a wonderful problem to have. If your residue's even, I still don't think you need them.
It's like
It has more to do with how even your residue is more than the thickness of it. If it's even, you can set it a little deeper and you can get in there and you'll be fine. But, and you're in a different area. You know, you're a whole state north of me. I'm down in Oklahoma, and I can't afford to even tickle the residue that I have a lot of times because I know when I do, it's going to speed up the breakdown of it. And I've got a little temperature deal, a little infrared deal that you use like on a motor to check the temperature of it. And a foot apart, you can have bare soil like this, you might have 120 to 130 degrees. And you get over 1 foot away where you have good heavy residue that hasn't been disturbed. And just move the residue out of the way just so you can take a shot at the soil. We're talking about 78 to 82 degrees. That's on a 100-degree day. You know, literally there can be 40 to 50 degrees difference a foot apart based on residue. I can't lose residue. I lose residue, I lose yield. What's that?
Corn residue or wheat residue?
It doesn't matter.
I mean, this young man.
Cover crop. I do 100% cover crops on everything I have. thousands of acres of sedan grass that we graze every summer. So I understand the problem. But where I am, with the heat and the moisture that we have, we lose residue so fast. And maybe you're not losing it, as fast as we are. Maybe you have more of a problem. But by the time I'm planting corn in the spring, I will even have residue that we lose in the winter. It's significant. And then you plant into it, you come back, you watch your stands, you watch it, and you don't see it. It's like watching the calf grow. You don't know how much bigger it's gotten if you look at it every day. But if you'll take a picture of that field whenever you're planting your corn and then come back and take a picture of that field 2 months later, you won't believe all the residue that's gone. It's amazing. And that stuff, that's money. That's money. I don't think that even fertility, whenever I'm doing my fertility stuff, I don't think has as big an impact on my yield as my residue load that I have going into the spring. I've just got to have it for my hot summers.
I'll take just a little different tack from Tom on row cleaners, but I'm a little farther north. The clients, where I'm out looking at the fields, a client, for instance, I regularly, I do their field scouting. It's not phone and email. This is just a little ways north of Wichita, specifically. It's kind of over in that Peabody area, pretty hilly. And this client uses shellborne heads on the wheat, and then the standard practice is to seed pearl millet along with a little bit of Sudan and other, some broadleaf stuff in there immediately after wheat harvest, so we get maximum growth. The pearl millet always heads out. The Sudan, if it rains, the Sudan's 5 feet tall. And because of those hills and the slow permeation of those clays, I've been super, super conservative about moving residue with the row cleaners. But I think we've, and they're still doing something. Those pearl millet and Sudan, the Sudan's usually standing, but the pearl millet stalks have fallen down. Just combing that row cleaner, just getting them all organized, the direction that the planter is going. You don't have to cut through them. And it seems like the wheat straw gets a little, even with the shellborne, it's a little heavier in places. It's kind of fallen down by that point. Sometimes gets kind of twisted. Getting that out of the way matters. I can't get as perfect of a stand in that high residue of condition without doing a little tickling of the residue. I mean, occasionally we'll plant something into low residue, like soybeans that had cover crop rye that's planted green. Well, there's zero hairpinning there, nothing whatsoever. And the stands are just so perfect when they do that compared to the stands in the wheat and pearl millet. So to me, it's still a balance, and I've told this client the last few years that, if you want a little more perfect stands, we're going to have to move a little bit more residue with that row cleaner. I hate it, but, and I've even got them that they've moved their corn planting dates back in warmer soils. I mean, even 2018 was perfect year for seeding out there. It was dry on top, which we almost never have. It was still a problem with some hairpinning here and there. You just can't get away from it without doing something with row cleaners.
I hear a lot of people have trouble sometimes in really heavy wheat straw, even if it's had a shellborne, trying to plant double crop or trying to plant your covers. With us, I'm telling you, I'm a prick when it comes to making sure that we control the way that we harvest the wheat field. We're going to go in the exact same direction as we do with our planter. I will not run my planter across a row where the combine has laid down that straw. We're going to go in the exact same direction. We count how many rounds we go back and forth, and then we're going to plant it on that same angle, whatever it is. If it's 3 degree that we harvested at, we're going to plant it at 3 degree so that we're not having to go across any tracks or anywhere where that straw's been laid over. We're going to go in the exact same direction, and I'm a prick about it. I really am, because it makes such a difference. Because I don't like running row cleaners. And so if we go the same direction, we're fine. But if we try to cross it, that's when we get hair pitting. Or if we have weed that got down quite a bit. Well, that's another great thing about a shell board. It'll comb that stuff back up and get it in line with the way I'm going to plant it.
Do your header widths match your planter widths or not?
No, but we're going to go on the exact same angle.
Question is whether header widths match the planter widths, and he said no.
And it doesn't matter if you're going the, you know, if I was going north, I don't need to plant north. As long as I'm parallel with that row, it doesn't matter if I'm going across. Going the opposite direction. That doesn't matter. As long as it's combed the same way that I'm planting, then it's not a problem. But it's real important. And I tell a lot of guys, I said, man, what we used to be in tillage, the most important pass we made was our last pass before we planted, right? You know, if we had it real deep work around here and then we had real shallow over here and didn't have a well-tuned tillage tool, then we were going to have a hard time doing a good job planting. Well, your last, kind of like your old tillage pass, is your combine. That's your last pass over. You've got to get that right. Because what you're doing is you're preparing your seedbed. Same way when you run cattle. Your cattle are the last thing they're going to be over it many times. You know, if I'm grazing something out or running sedan grass. So if I screw that up, and if I have cattle that are sinking over, say, a half inch to an inch deep, then I'm screwing up my seedbed potentially, especially if I go with cotton or something like that. So what do? I got to pull the cattle off. So everywhere that I run cattle on cropland, I've got, little areas of pasture somewhere that I can get the cattle off when it's wet. 100%. And that's a pain in the rear. And it takes a lot of labor and a lot of time, a lot of planning, and kind of an act of God. But if we've got a certain percentage chance of rain, we'll pull them early. Usually, we do a pretty good job of getting them off before we get a lot of rain on it. But that just takes more management and more labor.
He'll have his guys out in the middle of the night getting cattle off.
Oh, yeah. Yes, sir.
What kind of yields do you have down there for wheat normally?
Man, it ranges. This year we had 2,800 acres underwater, so it's kind of hard to tell. This year, where we had good wheat, 40 to 50 bushel this year on a tough year that was really, really wet. But we've had over 100 bushel yields too. You know, over the years, we'll have, I think the best I've ever had is around 108. That's a dry land wheat yield. That's rare. 70 is more common. Last year, our soybean yields were 49.9 overall average on a couple thousand acres. And it was a good year. It wasn't a great year, but the county average was around 30. So we were doing something right.
Okay, the question was, if you're putting your in subsurface versus broadcasting it and you get a 5-inch rain right afterwards, is there a difference in how much leaves the field? Yes, there is. If you're broadcasting, especially urea seems to move off a little bit more than liquid nitrogen, but they both move off. You'll see it, the waterways green up from the surface application. It's not a great, it's really not a great thing from an environmental standpoint, but if you're placing subsurface, you're sending soil along with it, and that's not a very nice thing either, and it's certainly not good for field productivity. And then you get all these rills that you have to figure out what to do with. To answer your question? Okay, the question was, when it gets really wet, is there a difference between urea and ammonium nitrate and how well it stays around? No, there isn't. But we have these wonderful things called nitrification inhibitors that will do a great job of keeping it around, regardless of what form you're using. Nitrification inhibitor, I'm trying to think of the brand name now, Agrotane Plus. The Plus is a nitrification inhibitor. Instinct, that's the word I was trying to come up with. Instinct's a nitrification inhibitor. So there's different ones,
Is
whether you're
Super
doing...
U just, it's a Coke product that has the Agrotane on it already, right?
Super U has both a nitrification inhibitor and a urease inhibitor all through the prill. It's made right into the prill, whereas Agrotane Plus, you're putting it onto an ordinary urea prill. And I don't think there's that much difference agronomically, and it's just convenience. You know, it was kind of funny. my clients, I tell my clients farther east and south, ask about Super U. Co-ops, fertilizer vendors, no, can't get it, never heard of such a thing. You can have it if you buy a whole truckload at a time. That's it. We're not dealing with it. Well, now all of a sudden something has changed, and there's this big push. Oh, we discovered Super U. It solves all your problems. You need Super U. So there's always something going on in the background, whether which things are being shoved at you. Anyway, those are agronomy questions. We're getting a little off tangent here, but getting back to the planter. And if you don't own a planter, if you own a John Deere drill or a Precision 500 drill, something with a gauge wheel, the concepts of seed placement with the drill, it's the same as the planter. Exact same thing. So a lot of these concepts carry over. So the next thing we need to do is cut a furrow. And this is pretty straightforward all along. We used to have 3mm opener blades, didn't like those. Went to 3.5 millimeter, and yes, they're a lot better in a number of regards. Years ago, this is probably 12 years, I don't know, at least 10 years ago, Exapta got a small batch of 4mm blades in, and we tried those, and it was a very obvious, quick thing. We ran it for one row for a ways out in the field, and we noticed right away that, hey, those blades got a lot hotter and the furrow was a lot wider. We didn't have fancy downforce to tell us, that it was taking more there, but I'm sure it was. So we decided right away that, hey, you want to limit your blade flex with 3.5 millimeter blades, but we don't want to eliminate too much blade flex with 4 millimeter blades. And it sounds like such a small difference, why would it matter? But the rigidity of the blade increases with the cube of the thickness. So it's absolutely exponential, the increased rigidity. On the John Deere drills, those blades are 5 millimeter. They still flex a little bit, which we'll talk about. So these 3.5 millimeter blades flex a lot. The backstop for that is that guard in between. So that's part and parcel with cutting a furrow, is that guard can't be too narrow or you're going to get too much blade flex. And the problem with too much blade flex is that the soil density varies as you go along. And so those blades are flexing and unflexing. And that's determining, if your guard's narrow, that's determining your effective depth. That furrow can get so narrow that you can't get a corn kernel or a soybean seed down to the bottom. This used to be a very common occurrence. It still is if you have worn out guards. That bottom of that furrow can get, so it's just the thickness of a credit card. And you'll find the seed somewhere, it's not at the bottom of the furrow. That little slit is below where the seed was, even if you had a Keaton and a Mojo wire pushing on it. And what was very revealing to me about the variation in blade flex is I could ride on the planter, and we're planting corn 2 inches deep, new Keatons, 2 inches tall, and with a narrow guard, those blades are flexing and unflexing. Your effective depth is changing, which you can see really easily with that Keaton. And it goes down to soil level, and then it starts riding up and down and up. We had way more than enough pressure on the planter. The gauge wheels were always on the ground. The bottom of the cut was always 2 inches deep, but you couldn't get the seed down there sometimes. Other times the soil mellowed out, the furrow widened up a little bit, so your effective depth doing all this crazy stuff. So you have to maintain those seed tube guards. But there's a happy medium there. You don't want that guard overly wide, because then you're making a wider furrow, It takes more down pressure, it's harder to close the furrow, and you have more sidewall compaction. So we want it just wide enough that we can consistently get a corn kernel or soybean seed down there to the bottom, no wider. So on the guards,
And I will point out that is a great tip. Watch those ketons if you have ketons on there. You can watch them and for sure for the first couple, 3 fields every year, I have a 4-wheeler and I'll just go out on the 4-wheeler and I got somebody else running it. And I watch. I look at every row. I go down through there and you can tell a lot about row-to-row changes that you might have slightly difference in the manufacturing. You know, for instance, on my 24 row 3 is going to need 1 hole more depth. Always has since I had it. Don't know why, have no idea why, but to get row 3 consistent with 2 and 4, it has to be 1 hole deeper. You find that stuff out quicker and easier with a 4-wheeler watching those ketons. It'll tip you off pretty quick. And you can watch a lot of things. You can see a lot of other things and adjustments that Matt's going to talk about. You can see really well, real live while he's planting with a 4-wheeler. Spend a lot of time out there driving around it while he's planting. It's an amazing way to learn a whole lot about how well you're performing on your planter. That combined with digging, of course there's a lot of digging, but most everybody does that.
So the OEM guards were made out of very soft cast material because it was cheap and it was plenty good enough for conventional till, where there's not much force on the blades. Here's one that's well past its prime. You can see the sides of it are bowed from the blade flex, the curvature.
In no-till, at least in our area, I would be very surprised if that was over maybe a couple hundred acres. You can get that. Now that one's severe, so that one might have 1,000 acres on it. But you'll get problems with the narrow trench in the bottom of your V within a couple hundred acres sometimes whenever you're dealing with some hard no-till ground, especially in your early years of no-till. Ours has significantly softened up over the last few years. In the last 10 years, it's completely changed. Our soils have. But in those first 4 years, it can be really, really, really hard. And you can wear out a set of those OEMs in a couple hundred acres sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. To rectify that, RK Products had come out with, this was back in the Phil Kester days before Copperhead owned them. RK Products came out with a guard. They had various iterations of it, but some pretty hard material, had floating wear pads down there and things to keep that furrow wide. But it was a complicated, expensive piece, and this went on and on for years. Phil's extremely anal, typical of an engineer. I kept telling him, it's like we knew there's those V-slice inserts that they actually run below the blades and they last a long time. I said, Phil, why don't you just cast this piece out of that same material? It may not be as perfect as your highly engineered piece with the ball bearing and floating wear pads, but it'll be more affordable and simple, and the wear pads won't fall off and all that stuff. Well, that went on, and I kept telling him that, and he was never doing it, and so finally I was like, Phil, do you mind if we do that? And he said yes, then later he said no, but I was already doing it, so he may not be happy. I don't know. He's out of the business now anyway. So we did exactly that. These are called the Valiant Chrome version. And they'll wear about twice what OEM does. At least OEM Deere. OEM, we do not have them for the white. We do have them for Kinsey 2000, 3000, not for the 4900. We've got them for all the Deere models. So that's helped a lot. They still wear out eventually. So I say on those, they start out at 15/16 thickness, and you get down around 5/8. If you can't finish the season without them getting below 5/8, you probably should replace them before the season, is what I usually tell people. I don't know that it's catastrophic at 5. Oh, this one died too. Oh, that was you, Leah. I don't know if it's catastrophic yet at 5/8, but you get down to 9/16, that's pretty questionable in my mind. So on the blades themselves, you want to replace those when half the bevel is gone. And we've got a new product here on the market. My lovely assistant Kent is holding up. These are called, they're a couple of different brands. STP, I think it stands for Sabertooth something or other. Or a razor blade is another name for them. Just to cover all that, I call them the Sawtooth Blade. One is a 1/4 inch smaller than the other, so that the teeth never, they don't get stuck in a pattern where they're perfectly aligned. They're always, most of the time, they're going to be off a little bit. And the claim, and it may be true, the claim is that it's cutting the residue better, and the claim is that it's disrupting, tearing up that sidewall more so that you get better rooting out to the side. Now, I have yet to, I haven't observed them closely enough in heavy residue to know whether they cut any better or not. Could easily be true. I have no reason to doubt that.
Question. Yeah, Matt, have you seen any conditions where they're worse than the standard blades?
I'm getting to that.
Sorry.
The lifting of the sidewall and chiseling, making ripples in the sidewall might be good in many conditions, especially if it's pretty wet. But if it's dry and loose, I am very concerned that that is going to cause sidewall to fall in ahead of the seed. Again, I have not observed that. It's in the tests. We were running them on a planter this spring. One row, we moved it around between rows, changed the shimming, a bunch of different things. I did not observe that. What we did find out, which was shocking to me at first, very shocking, was we made the first round, the guy around the planter jumps out, the farmer, and he's like, wow, it takes so much more down pressure on that row. He's got hydraulic individual row downforce, and so he can watch it all, and he's like, you know, it was maxing out. He had 425 pound downforce limit, and it was maxing out at times. And you're like, wow, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, they look like they should just go in so easily. They remind you of a saw blade, only sharper. And I thought for a second, it's like, well, they are 4 millimeter, so there's less flex. So maybe that's it. But the disparity was so big, and I doubted whether that actually explained it fully. So I got thinking about it a little bit more and talked to an engineer friend, and we realized that you're actually forcing a lot more surface area through the soil with all these saw teeth. Because that blade runs at an angle, each one is carving its own path out through that sidewall. Because you can see those ripples. It's carving its own path. So if you figure the surface area here, the total area around here, you know, you're 50% higher than a standard blade. So that explains why it was taking about 35% more down pressure on average. There are times where it was taking 60 and 70% more. I don't know why. This was compared to a brand new John Deere blade on the row next to it. Like I said, we moved them around. So it was a lot. And that is going to be, I mean, that just almost knocks it out of being a practical application in Kansas and southward. Yes, sure, we can run more down pressure. We can set those limits higher. I'm not sure what those actuators can actually put down, but they're pretty good size. I'm sure we could put down 500 or 600 pounds if we wanted to, if we have enough toolbar weight to do that. So that'd be the next constraint. So yeah, we can run more, but will that row unit withstand that? I don't think so, because you hear of a few people snapping off those cast shanks already now, running, 300, 400 pounds of pressure. So I don't think it's going to fly. But what I'm trying to feed back up the chain of the people selling this is, let's at least try this in a 3.5 millimeter version and see how much of the problem that eliminates. Is, maybe there's some value here, but at the 4 millimeter version, it's not going to fly. Even north of here, I don't think it flies in long-term no-till. I know from north central South Dakota, which is cream puff soils, some of them 30 years of no-till, they hit 400 pounds of pressure on their planter openers with just standard John Deere blades, nothing else in front. There's no sideband fertilizer opener. There's nothing else in there taking down pressure. Now, it doesn't hit 400 very often, but it does hit it at times. And this is on a very mild, almost muddy spring. I was looking at the maps from this year. It was muddy. There's no doubt about it. It was muddy. They wouldn't have been able to go without open rim Mudsmith type gauge wheels. So on a dry year, they're going to be maxed out, on 20% of the field. So there's a real problem here. Now maybe up in the Great Lakes or someplace, Manitoba, maybe the 4.5 millimeter version would work in long-term no-till. I'm sure they're fine in some sort of tilled seed beds, but I don't care about that. My sole focus is long-term no-till. So that's the lay of the land on sawtooth opener blades. Any questions?
Are they directional, or can you run them in the direction?
They're directional. Yeah, it's very conclusive. We need at least 35% more downforce with the sawtooth blade. I mean, we've tested it side by side, very thorough, moving rows back and forth. It takes more down pressure. Yes, it looks like, wow, that should penetrate the soil easily. It's intuitive. I think that's why everybody latches onto this. Wow, that should cut residue and cut the soil so well. But as with a lot of things in engineering, what's intuitive isn't necessarily correct. And all this additional area, it's like trying to force a 20-some inch blade into the ground. You've got to measure all this, and that all has to go into the ground and carving its own path. So it's much easier to push a smooth blade into a ground than the sawtooth.
Any less hairpinning?
I don't know. The claim is less hairpinning. I could see that. I have no reason to doubt that there would be less hairpinning with that. It should cut better because it's a smaller leading edge. I mean, it almost certainly. But we can't. It's disastrous when you exceed the down force. When you limit out on downforce, it's disastrous to seed placement. Because the farmer made this first round, and I wanted to see, how the seed placement looked, and whether that little rippling, whether there was premature sidewall collapse, all this. I was out there and I was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. There's not a single seed where it's supposed to be. Well, once he told me that it had exceeded the downforce, okay, the gauge wheels aren't on the ground. That's why the seed placement was so horrible. So, once we got, some other passes, I found areas where, all right, we did have enough down pressure, then the seed placement was okay. But keeping that gauge wheel on the ground is so important to seat placement. So important. Because it's what keeps the sidewall from falling in.
How much margin are you running with the hydraulics versus you might, like on me with my air down pressure, I have to run a couple 100 pounds of margin almost all the time just to have enough down pressure on my airtight downforce system. So I'm running 200 pounds of margin, sometimes even more. And but on hydraulics, I mean, what kind of margins are y'all running on that? Can you run 40 pounds and know it's there? 80 pounds?
Margin makes no difference whether it's hydraulic or air. The difference is the people that develop the software. Margin for precision planting is, their system is very consistent. 40 to 80 usually does it, Jerry? On margin? Huh?
That's what we do.
Yeah, 40 to 80 is about, and margin is what's on the gauge wheel. And so that's, seems like a very realistic number, 40 to 80. The ag leader systems are also like precision planting. It's a small range. It's a bit proportional. The higher the downforce required, you run a little more margin, but it's still, 40 to 80 or whatever. It's not a big number. The deer systems have always been weird. Whether it's the air system or with the hydraulics, the margin number makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, I've been saying, for a long time with the airbags, the deer system with the airbags, don't ever go below 100 pounds of margin. Ever. Even if it's mud, you have to have 100 pounds of margin. And you're going to need 200 at times. And my farmers want to argue with you. And it's like, margin, it's what's on the gauge wheel. I don't want 200 pounds on the gauge wheel. I'm just like, the numbers don't make sense. But that's what you have to do to make it work right. And so we were having trouble here in this plot. Going through these combine tracks were super hard. So 160 pounds of margin was a disaster. Seed scattered everywhere, depth was inconsistent. So we were running 240, and it was pretty good until you get a little bit down there where apparently the tracks are even harder than they are up here. 240 was not enough. Kent says he sometimes runs as high as 300 in severe conditions. 90 to 300, is that your range usually? Yeah. So obviously there's not 300 pounds of pressure on the gauge wheel. It doesn't make any sense. It's like a lot of deer things. It'll just hurt your head trying to make sense of it. Just deal with it, go on.
If you're worried about your pheasant quail eggs, you can run it at 50 pounds and you'll never crush one unless it hits the disc. I mean, you'll seriously go right over the top of it. I won't even break an egg out there at 40 and 50 pounds with a deer.
And I think it's important that we notice right away here that the conditions here are so much better than they are, say, at Wichita versus where Tom's at. Ever 100 miles further south, no-till or crop conditions just get a lot more extreme. And Matt already has said that as we go north, we find even better conditions than we do here, both climatological and soil conditions, both. And we can learn a lot from our southern neighbors on what, if they can make it work there, it's a piece of cake up here. But the point I wanted to make is the difference between hydraulic and airbag down pressure on your planter. And it's been our experience that the hydraulic down pressure is almost instantaneous in changing versus the airbags. We really like that. Matt's got some precision planting maps on down pressure that show the effectiveness of the hydraulic down pressure. Yeah, I've sent this out as a newsletter, but crossing irrigation tracks, going back and forth with hydraulic downforce, it makes pretty much a perfect line on the map. It's not checkerboarded. There's the latency, the lag is so small that it might be 6 inches and it's already adjusted. It's fast. And you see that, in
non-irrigated fields, there's a combine track or whatever, grain cart track, it is right on the money. So hydraulic downforce on planters, if you don't have it yet, get that on your budget. And it's just night and day. You know, one of my clients went to hydraulic downforce this year where I'm out scouting his fields, checking his seed placement, his emergence. It's really spot on. And Ken will tell you, his stands the last 2 years with this planter have just been, you know, noticeably better, maybe even head and shoulders more uniform. I drove up to his house yesterday, and the corn by his house is like, man, that is just a picket fence stand. All the ears are the same height, and stalks are the same diameter. And like, wow, that's really impressive. I thought, well, maybe it was soybean stubble to get that uniform. So I got down to the house and asked Kent, and he said, no, that's wheat stubble that had pearl millet in it. I'm just like, wow, that's really good performance. So, and a lot of that owes to the hydraulic downforce. And, you know, it's automatic and it's telling you exactly what's going on. You know, yeah, it can be automatic with airbags, but those things are so slow, you'll be from here to those grain bins before the darn thing adjusted. And heaven forbid you go square over a terrace and dump all that air. Now you're, you know, a couple hundred yards down the field before it builds pressure again. So airbags may be a teeny bit better than springs. I've never really bought into the airbag deal. They don't bounce like springs, but if you do have airbags, please run them in manual setting. Auto airbags, no, it's not a good idea. Any questions on that?
You know, we get worried sometimes that we're going to have the sidewall compaction. We're going to have more compaction by running too much down pressure. And this past year, I made a real effort to track some areas that had extreme amounts of down pressure, like tops of terraces or humps, going over a little hill somewhere, and just tracked that wheat crop all the way through to harvest. And then now I'm watching my summer crops and watching them progress. And in our area, I mean, it takes something crazy. Like maybe you were planting in something that's really wet like this with extreme down pressure for me to really see problems with it. Realizing this is mature 20-year no-till with extensive amount of cover crops and organic matters that have gone from 1.5 to 3.5, 4.5. One field this year we grid sampled the whole thing, averaged over 5. In Oklahoma, that's unheard of. That's actually better than some of my native pasture. So we do have soils that are getting much more healthy, but man, 90% of my problems over the last 20 years with stand establishment came from not having enough down pressure. If you're not sure if you have enough, add some. Go another 20% more down pressure and then roll with it.
Did you have the hydraulics?
No, but I sure wish I did. I've been talking to Matt about it for 2 years and I just haven't spent the money. Airbag.
Are you mostly in a sandier soil?
What was your question?
Are you on a mostly sandy soil?
I've got river sand and the heaviest Lila clay that is on the soil maps in Oklahoma, both in the same field. I need hydraulic terribly.
Where are you from, Tom?
Terribly. North central Oklahoma, just off of I-35, around Ponca City. Yeah, in that area.
How many pounds of down pressure are you usually trying to put on?
All of it.
I know, but
Whatever I can get. I'll have 400 pounds a row, a lot.
okay.
I have that. I'm pretty well maxed out a lot of the time. It depends. Hell, everything always depends, right? But I do try to run on my margins. I'm at 200 pounds plus all the time on my margins. So actual down pressure on the units is around 400. A year ago, we were custom planting for a guy. I never should have taken the job. It's one of those deals where you take a job to go plant for somebody, and then you kick yourself because you know you should look at the field first. Well, it had mare's tail all over it. It was super dry, and it was in early July trying to plant soybean. And I'm telling you, we were breaking disc off. We were breaking some of those hubs off out there. And we still didn't have enough. And we were breaking stuff. So never should have taken the job. That cost me a lot of money. I think I replaced 2 row units, entire row units, not just where the disc breaks off on that stuff, but 2 entire row units we had cracks and breaks in. That was fairly new no-till, and it was just a bunch of mare's tail that he'd let go. It was super hard.
Yeah.
I hang a lot of weight. I hang a lot of weight on my stuff. I add weight to everything.
The question is, do you get more wear out of a Sawtooth Blade than a standard? I have no idea. Paul Schaffer's here selling them. He says we haven't had enough time to really analyze that to the full extent. I mean, they might last longer just because they're 4mm, but I mean, it's sort of irrelevant here because we can't keep them in the ground.
I would be really nervous about if a lot of guys have those. We already tend to not want to change out our discs, and you see those on there and said, oh well, they're supposed to last longer, and I think it would cause someone to tend to run them too long. I think it would, because there's nothing worse than running wore out blades. That's horrible. I mean, we change blades at least twice a year on our planters and our drill. If they're not sharp, perfectly sharp, they're coming off. I can't afford to. In our conditions, I can't afford to run those things whenever they're dull. They've got to stay sharp. You know, 1/4 inch wear would be about the most I've ever ran one off in the last 10 years. That's cheap, guys. That's super, super cheap to replace those discs compared to not doing it. Seed costs too much. Seed cost is way too expensive. Of course, we're running 80, 90,000 population on soybean. You know, 16 to 20,000 on corn. So we're already running pretty low. They all have to come up. I've got to have 85+% emergence is what I need. And you can't get that when you're out stuff. Anything for out. You can't get it.
What are your comments on one blade leading the other?
Okay, comment on one blade leads the other. You talking about running one new and one... Are you talking running one new and one worn out, or are you talking about Case IH where they're...
Where Case IH has an offset?
Okay, Case IH has an offset blade, so does Great Plains. In theory, it's better. There's less hairpinning with offset blades. The Case planter has so many problems that the offset blade, you're still worse off. I mean, even with the offset blade. Great Plains I like better. At least the gauge wheels are still not in exactly the right place, but it's not as bad as the Case IH. In theory, yes, if we could get the gauge wheels in the proper place from the manufacturer, an offset blade is going to cut better. The problem is with offset blades is sometimes mud goes into places that it doesn't go into with the one side by side. And it comes down to some very small details of how that's engineered. You know, if I were approached on designing a new opener, I'm not too sure I would advise going down the path of offset blades unless we've got a big budget and a lot of time to get that exactly right so it'll go through a lot of mud. So that's one thing you hear about Case planters, they won't go through mud. Down in the Texas Blacklands, there are no Case planters. In fact, Case even had what they called a Blacklands edition. It was a Case planter with Kinsey row units on, because it was the only thing they could make work there. Okay, back to placing seed. Now, we talked a little bit about controlling the sidewall blowout. Ken, can you hold up one of those blades for me? Okay, so if you take your planter and lower it down onto the concrete floor with one side disassembled, you'll see that seed tube ends 2 inches above the bottom of the blade, assuming your blades aren't worn out. 2 inches. There's nothing there guiding that seed into position other than the blades and eventually the sidewall. If you look at the trajectory of this seed, if you you look at the trajectory of the seed, where it's going, it's back here, this tube's between the blades there. The trajectory of the seed, the blade is starting to come up out of the soil at the exact spot where the seed is deposited. And the seed may bounce and roll a little bit. So that means that blade cannot be lifting the sidewall, or you're going to have crevices under there that the seed's going to go under if it's a sticky clay, or if it's dry and crumbly, that sidewall is starting to disintegrate and move around on you. And you won't have all the seeds in the bottom of the furrow if you don't control sidewall blowout. The gauge wheel is what controls sidewall blowout. If you don't believe me, take a gauge wheel off. The soil's rooster tailing everywhere. And on the case planters, it's rooster tailing everywhere coming out of there. It's maybe not quite as visible as if the gauge wheel's off of there completely, but if you ride along on there and watch it, that soil's coming up and out. It's just sort of a little wave coming out of there. So we need the gauge wheels in this position, fore aft by design. We also need them up tight against the blade so that soil is not trying to follow the blade up and out. As the blade gets closer to the surface, it becomes more important. And that's why we need this gauge wheel so securely on the ground. Everybody's going by their monitor. It says 99% ground contact. Not good enough. You're going to have a lot of misplaced seeds at 99% ground contact. It better be 100%, and you better get out and check. Don't trust what the monitor tells you. Are all the seeds in the bottom of the furrow? Pick the hardest place in the field, the driest, the hilltop. Look in the combine track, the sprayer track. Check it. Make sure your furrow depth is always the same. If it's set 2 inches, it better be 2 inches on 99.8% of the field, or you're going to be unhappy. So we try to get these shimmed up against the blades. And Leah and Dale, my helpers, they usually set up these planters. For the seeding school, they put new blades and guards on and all that. I always go along and check the gauge wheel shimming afterwards, always. Apparently haven't got them totally educated. Perhaps that's my fault. Maybe I don't explain things well. But what I'm concerned about, I don't care what the gauge wheel is doing at the front of the blade. Lift the gauge wheel up into position and look along there at where the blade is exiting, where the blade and the gauge wheel meet. With the gauge wheel up in there, look at that spot. Is there a gap there? I don't want any gap. If there's more than a 1/16 of an inch gap there, fix it. Because it's gonna cause problems.
Absolutely, and as you get wear in those arms that are carrying that and that are going up and down, those got to be kept right too. Because as you lift it up, or as you get pressure on it, even sometimes that'll move away. So you always got to lift it up and check it right. So many times I see people check it, even guys that work for me, and they'll come up and just do this. Go, well, it's touching. It's good, and walk away. You got to lift it up. You got to lift that sucker up and look at it where the soil is exiting. That's where you got to be holding it down. The rest of it, whatever. But I bet I don't see less than 10% of the planters that I've looked at helping guys set them up down there have that right. Less than 10%. That thing has to be shimmed over. And as soon as these arms that are carrying the gauge wheel get warm, you got to change them out. Like I said, seed is too expensive to have, a few parts wore out. And it's a combination of all these things. What we're trying to do is actually quite simple. And then once you get all the complexities of all the different attachments and all the different things, it gets very, very complex. But to say it, there's really 5 things that you really need to do. You need to have a well-defined V that your seed's going to go in that's consistent. You want to put the seed in the bottom of it, firm the seed in the bottom of it, and put loose dirt on top. Simple. But there's so many variables in fields, and there's so many variables in different equipment and attachments that sometimes we make it really, really hard. Planter set up right and balanced right, you're set and level.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when you're doing maintenance, lift this gauge wheel up into operating position and shove it in and out. Is there any wiggle there? You get rid of all the wiggle. Fix it. You can't have any wiggle there. Your shimming is hopeless if you've got wiggle. Because those gauge wheels, they're being pushed, they want to splay out away. And the blade, see, this stuff has to be tight because the blades are going to suck in. They're flexing under load. So they're making a gap already. So I really don't even care if that gauge wheel is lightly rubbing at the point I talked about. Because in the field, it's not going to be rubbing. The blades pull in. You know, so I'm...
Get on a four-wheeler and watch them. You'll see them. You'll see that dirt flying out of there if it's not right.
Yeah. So the shallower you're planting, the looser and drier it is, the more important this is. Gauge wheel must be tight against the blade and stay there.
There are conditions where you're going to have some loose dirt. Try to get in there. Last year, trying to plant cotton was incredibly difficult. 1 inch deep, and the moisture line was 1 inch down. So trying to place that cotton seed, and it was my first year to plant cotton. And they told me you can't go deeper than an inch, which turned out to be BS. I chased moisture and went down 1.5 inches, and in my my long-term no-till fields with good cover on top, I was fine. Those were my best things. That's one other little tip I might say: don't be scared to go a hole deeper. Don't be scared to do that. Once you're in no-till for a long enough time, I've found that I plant everything deeper than I used to. I rarely plant wheat shallower than 1.5 inches deep in actual soil. I'm not talking about the fluff on top. That's just one example. Corn's 2 to 3 inches deep. Never under 2. Never under 2 1/4. A lot of 2.5 and 3 inch deep stuff. I'm in Oklahoma. Tough conditions. Soil dries out fast. But
I was kind of talking about planter setup, so I hadn't got into planter levelness yet, which will, when we pull ahead and go. In some past seeding schools, I've even had, park the planter, everybody go back in the distance and tell me whether it's nose up or nose down. But yes, it needs to be a few degrees nose up. It's hard to tell because if you're close, that tongue is at an angle, which is deceptive. So you got to get way back in the distance, get your eye exactly level with these row units. Get level with the row units and look. If you've got markers, it's easy, but as Paul said, there's some wear in these linkages. So even if the toolbar is perfectly straight, level, if there's wear in these linkages, the row unit itself can be a little nose down. And that's what we care about. We don't care about the rest. We want the planter nose up slightly. Several degrees nose up. Level is good. Probably 80% of the planters out there are being run nose down. And it was horrible before we had 2-point linkages because there were some shenanigans involved in getting the tongue the right height, all kinds of different things you had to do. Sometimes it involved some fabricating, get the darn thing right, depending on your tire size and all that. For some reason, the planter people never actually hook them on to a tractor to see where the tongue height is. It's like, it's adjustable, but I've maxed out the adjustment and it's not even close to level. So with 2-point, it's easy, but you need to check it. Get way back off in the distance and look at the thing compared to the surrounding terrain, and you'll have a pretty good idea. If in doubt, edge it up a little bit more. Too much nose up is a problem because then you start those blades, the pinch point of the blades is rotated up. You can start getting a little W down there if you're planting real shallow or soil conditions are kind of dry. You're also making a wider furrow as you roll that under. So you don't want to be dramatically nose up, not 10 degrees nose up. 2 or 3 degrees nose up is where you want to be. And
if you're not running it yourself, double check it all the time because sometimes it looks weird. My drawbar looks weird when it's running right. It looks like I'm running it uphill like this on the drawbar out front. And my guy that plants for me been planting for 40 years. guy, he'll change it, and I've got to watch him because he'll try to put it back. So I went and got a bunch of donuts. You know, those donuts that go on a hydraulic cylinder. I've got a drawbar type with the hydraulic cylinder on the front that will adjust it. I put donuts on it and I counted them. So if I don't see it, you know, if he pulls up into the yard, I can tell if he took one of them off. Unless he's being real sneaky and sticking the thing back on there. But he hates watching it run like that. And he just can't get it through his head that front drawbar.
Yeah, and part of it's this optical illusion of this triangular tongue. It makes it look like it's running more uphill than it really is. That's why you got to get way back in the distance, crouch down till you're straight across from it. Then you can tell something. And then you still need to be a few more degrees nose up to account for wear and the linkages and all that stuff. So yeah, it's going to look a little weird, but it has to happen. As Paul was saying, the more nose down you're running, you're taking your seed tube that's running like this and you're making it flatter like this. So it's shooting the seeds farther back. It's even harder to get good placement. They're bouncing more and there's more of that sidewall coming in ahead of the seed. Your relationship of where the seed drops compared to where the blade's starting to come up out of the ground, you've made it worse. You do not want to do that. That's why you want to be a few degrees nose up, always. And when it comes to adjusting planters, you know, everybody starts scratching for seed, seeing what the depth is, how the closing is, the row cleaners. You're all excited about all this stuff. Forget it. Get the planter level to nose up first, because it changes everything back here. Everything. You know, you've got...
If you forget and do that last, you're going to end up having to go back and reset everything.
Exactly.
You start from there and work your way back.
Exactly. That's the first thing, because it changes how much pressure is on the linkage. Being a little bit nose up changes the angle in your closing wheels. It makes them more aggressive instead of less. It puts more pressure on your keating when you're running a little nose up. So all these problems that you're having, it's probably just because the planter's running downhill. Make sure you got that right first. Don't worry, don't pay any attention to anything else until you got that right. So we've deposited seed, hopefully in the bottom of the furrow by doing all these things right. I guess I didn't really talk about gauge wheels much. On planters that don't have hydraulic individual auto control, I still like 4.5-inch gauge wheels because the gauge wheel's tilted out from vertical because see the blades are flush with the blade. Blades are gap, I think a V. Gauge wheels are tipped. So the worst pressure on the gauge wheel is on this outer edge, what it's riding on. And I don't want that most severe compaction closer to the row, especially for corn, because I got to get the crown roots to grow through that. So if you don't have really good downforce control with hydraulics and individual row automation, I prefer to stay with 4.5. I don't have a study to prove that. That's just my stance. Once you go to hydraulics, then I think you're open to, 3-inch wide gauge wheels may be fine. And moving that outer edge closer to the blades, that's probably a good thing. You may have even better control of sidewall blowout with a narrower gauge wheel. We certainly found that with the drills. Open rim gauge wheels, that seems to be almost standard anymore. I mean, if you've ever fought mud, you know the reason for these. And people sometimes start out with a few rows on the outer wings where they hang it into the mud hole, and pretty soon they've got them all the way across. I mean, there were a few farmers, clients of mine, who bought them this year for their planters, and most of them said, without those, I'd still be digging the planter out. I wouldn't be done planting corn. Never would have got it done on time. So we happen to sell Mud Smith, these are Deere, which was actually made by Yetter. They do about the same thing. However, the actual gauge wheel itself, Mud Smiths are thicker. I forget whether it's 20% or 40% thicker, which doesn't sound like much, But I know people that say, that run them on their drills, and they'll say, I could only go 1 year drilling into soybean stubble with the deer ones, and I put some of the Mudsmith ones on, and I can get 2 years. So the wear life is noticeable. Now, if you want truly great wear life, there's the urethane. Needham's got them. There's some other companies that have urethane. They're hard as a rock, though, which probably is making that sidewall compaction a little worse. Again, I don't have proof of this. It's just, it stands to reason. There's less cushion there. If nothing else, it's like a radial tire. That little bit of cushion and deformity of a rubber tire, it's spreading the load out front to back. And you're not going to get that with a rock hard gauge wheel. And the other thing about the urethane is they don't shed mud as well, which I know that's a little counterintuitive. Urethane should shed mud better, but not having that flexing seems to make a difference on gauge wheels. Has anybody else encountered that? Okay. They will last. Urethane's going to last 4 or 5 times longer. No doubt about it. So if you can't stand it anymore, there's always the urethane option. If you're doing rubber tires, be careful once you get away from 4.5 inch. The narrower ones, the 3 inch and the 2.5 inch, some of those are not semi-pneumatic. They don't have an air cavity inside. They are hard as a rock too. So I don't know why you would even bother running those. There's no, they're not going to shed mud better, and they're just going to wear out. You might as well have a urethane tire versus those. So, and the last time I looked at Deere's 3-inch gauge tire in their parts part of their store, those are damn hard. I'm like, oh, I don't like that. So they used to have air cavities. So last I knew, the Shoup ones have an air cavity in the 3-inch, and the Mudsmiths do. So I would stick with those if you're doing 3-inch tires, or order one in and inspect it. I mean, you should be able to push your thumb in there and make an indentation without too much trouble. I mean, your thumb should go 1/4 of an inch in when you squish that air cavity out. So, all right, we've got seeds in the bottom of the furrow, hopefully. Now we want to do seed firming. Now, in conventional till, the soil was loose. You walked out in there, your feet sunk in. You didn't have any trouble closing the furrow whatsoever. The soil just kind of flowed around the opener, and you didn't anything at all back here. The furrow is closed, and you did seed-to-soil contact because the soil is loose and it's dried from tillage. So it's easy to compress all that and get your seed-to-soil contact. In no-till, it's different. Did your feet sink this morning when you walked out here? No, they didn't. Run this planter and take off a closing bracket. It's going to be exactly the shape that the blade's left it. You have to do positive closing. Well, because the soil's got resilience to it, it's not easily manipulated, it takes an enormous amount of pressure at the surface to do any sort of seed firming down at the seed's location, especially if you're running 2 inches deep. Now, the drier the soil, the easier it is, but if it's long-term no-till, it's just, and there's any amount of moisture in it, you just can't do it. I mean, you can run 150 pounds of pressure here, and you barely are doing anything down at seed depth, and it's certainly not consistent. So with no-till, Dwayne Back taught us, and it's very easily confirmed, we need to do firming down at the seed's location. And the most effective way of doing that on planters so far has been with Keaton's. Now I've been around Keaton's since '94. Actually, long before I started Exapta, I got a dealership from Precision Planting. I think it's about '95 or so for Keaton's, and the darn things would lose their pressure after a year. So I carried an extra set around in my pickup, and the first day to the field for the farmer's, my client's planter, you know, I told him, mate, tell me when you're going to the field. I want to be there and set this planter. Well, I'd show up. The Keatons had gotten soft from the previous year, and they hardly have enough pressure when they were new. So I'd be, all right, you know, I'll sell you these at my cost, and we'll fix this problem. So we'd take an hour or two, depending on how big the planter was, and get it taken care of. So one thing led to another. Phil Kester, I always had the idea of we should put a leaf spring on there and get some real pressure. You know, if I could set a brick on top of that Keaton, I could really do some good in these hard soils in Kansas. That'd be wonderful. I'd love to have 10 pounds of pressure there, or 15 or 20. Love it. I mean, that's what the John Deere drills put down on a similar surface area. So I always thought, you know, man, a leaf spring or something there would sure help. But I never got anything done with it. I was so busy doing agronomy stuff and was not very focused on, you know, I didn't know the people I needed to know to make that work. I don't know what this is. So Phil Kester, one of my clients, was doing some other testing for Phil Kester, the founder of RK Products, and this guy, Joe Swanson, he told Phil, he's like, you know, these Keatons are pretty nice, but I just need more pressure. And Phil went to his van, rummaged around, and came up with some spring wire, music wire they called it. And they kind of formed it around and made the very first, what we now call the Mojo wire. It worked beautifully. I mean, that was the moment we started having good stands in no-till in Kansas. That was the moment. Before, you know, I talked to farmers up in South Dakota, where I was from. They were in long-term no-till, and like, gee, they had 95% emergence all the time, never less than 90. And I was like, man, I would kill for that emergence down here. I just couldn't do it. But once we put the Mojo wire on the plant, on the Keaton, that's when emergence shot way up. And we started cutting seeding rates, and like, wow, these stands are perfect every time. So that was just a huge bonus. Yes, the Keaton helped, but those early Keatons would maybe put down a pound or so of pressure if they were brand new, maybe a pound and a half. And this was during the time all the experts in the Corn Belt were talking ounces. You want 8 ounces of pressure on that Keaton. And I was like, no, I want the absolute max. I'd like 8 pounds, please. And so the Mojo wire doesn't quite get us to 8 pounds, but it gets us to 5 pretty routinely. And it's interesting that we've gone through so many iterations of the Keaton now, from the original seed tube mounted to the gold, which actually had even less pressure than the seed tube mounted. I couldn't believe it. And then they've started going the other direction. Ever since the gold, the old universals, universals, and the quick attach, and now the non-stick. Each one of those iterations, the pressure has gone up significantly. So they are catching on. It's you know, sort of gratifying in a way. It's like, all right, you know, they're admitting I was right. They used to wave their hands like, no, it's ounces, not pounds. But
I
yeah,
just don't know why they can't have something in the mold.
it's too difficult. It's way too expensive. Putting a piece of spring steel into that injection mold, it gets nightmarishly complex and expensive. You go from, you know, $10,000 worth of tooling to $100,000 tooling to make that happen. And then as it flexes, that spring steel starts to wear into the plastic. So it's just not, it's not easy. Yeah, I always thought this should be easy, but it's not. So the latest, the non-stick Keaton, the black one, they actually call it low stick. Is this still working? They call it low stick, which I appreciate their conservatism, but it sounds weird to me. I'm used to like non-stick frying pans, which still stick, you know. Eggs stick to that really good. So I just call them non-stick Keatons. It seems to roll off the tongue better and isn't so weird. So those black ones, they came out this year. They had some problems, apparently with just the tail being snapped over the skeleton. So I think that was just a manufacturing problem. I think they're okay. I think they'll probably go with a full-fledged introduction this year. I don't know. Leah, Dale, did we get any feedback on wear life or anything like that? No? Okay, so it's a little bit of an unknown. The interesting thing is those non-stick Keatons will put down about 2/3, about 70% of the pressure that a quick attach Keaton with Mojo will put down. Which, from here south, it's probably not enough. You probably want the quick attach with the Mojo, because there's a lot of times, I was out here working with this plot, and I was like, man, I really wish I had more pressure on these Keatons. So going back to less pressure, I don't think that's going to work Kansas and southward, but maybe up north, that non-stick might be the ticket. Any questions on that? There's some other things out there to firm the seed like a Keaton, one of which was called the Flow Right, which this was their attempt to overcome, wear. The springy part is different from the wear resistant part, and this part's replaceable. But they kind of botched the design. This little ship's prow here gathers mud terribly, so it kind of went nowhere. I mean, it went from being a big deal to you don't hear anything about them anymore. They also, if you're a high acreage guy, they wear so much that you can't replace the tail anymore because you wore into the plaque. So they've kind of gone by the wayside. Another option to do all this stuff, firming and some degree of sidewall disruption, is the Furrow Jet, which seems to be a pretty popular thing with precision planting, and according to them, it solves all the world's problems, and you gain yield like all their other products, gains X amount of yield. Couldn't possibly be otherwise. I do like this. It's an impressive piece of engineering. It's really cool. This thing that's shooting fertilizer out through these wings, that's spring-loaded, so if you hit a rock or a hard spot, it can ride up without breaking something or lifting the whole row unit. This little Keaton here, which I thought, man, that's not near enough pressure, but in conjunction with this, it works quite okay. The seed firming is great because these little wings, as they go through the soil, they're doing a little bit of pinching action. So the Keaton doesn't have to work as hard, and you get that pinching action. So the seed placement's really nice. And having a cut through that sidewall, that's wonderful. Anything to break that sidewall up more so the roots can grow through it. Now, the fertilizer placement part, that's okay. You can place more fertilizer through this than you can through a Keaton because it's squirting out into that sidewall rather than right on top of the seed. Now, that Furrow Jet allows you to do both. You can still place some on top of the seed, or you can squirt solely out the wings, vice versa, whatever, however you want to slice and dice that. The only downfall with this seems to be mud. And it's not that mud adheres to those little wings, it's that mud piles up on top of the bracket. So I've got two of my clients had these for 1 year. And that was the end of it. And I kind of liked them. I was sorry to see them go. But they're like, when you're digging gauge wheels out and mud's piling up on everything, it piles up on top of that bracket, it's harder to clean out the gauge wheels, yada yada. You think, well, gee, a spoke closing wheel would solve all that. No. Precision planting themselves tell you that with a Furrow Jet, you should not run these open rim gauge wheels because corn stalks get wedged in front of this thing and it clogs everything up. So it's a cool piece of technology. Try it on a row or two. Wait till you've got a muddy year before deciding you want them on every row. Be my advice. But there's some things there to like. The question was, do the non-stick actually shed mud better than the white material? I don't have a firm handle on that. We had a few out this year. I think it's better, but quite frankly, we don't have much problem in long-term no-till with the mojo wire on there. Once you put enough pressure on that Keaton, if you have a well-defined furrow, and enough pressure to keep the Keaton down in there, it wipes itself clean against the sidewall. You might have a little bit of gumminess up towards the top, but the business end stays nice and clean. But I do realize there are some soils out there that are so nasty that not even that works. And so I think that non-stick Keaton was an attempt to address that. And I don't know yet if it was successful or not. There's a few other things that non-stick tail does. For one thing, if you forget back up in the ground or back up in the weeds, that tail will release out of there rather than destroying the bracket or the Keaton. So that's kind of nice. And you don't have to replace the bracket each time, it's just the tail. But they're proud of them. They're a lot more expensive than the Keaton standard, the quick attach Keaton. They're 55 versus 30. So.
Matt, have you done any work with smart firmers yet?
Question was, have I done any work with smart firmers? No, I don't have any customers running them, but there's times where I sure wish they would. Because I get out there and the seed, they're not cutting the furrow to moisture. The seeds are not all in moisture. They weren't paying enough attention. And smart firmer, even if it's smart firmer on just one row, it would tell them that occasionally you are not to moisture. You need to set deeper, run more down pressure, whatever you need to do. So I love the concept of a smart firmer. For those of you who are scratching your head, smart firmer's Precision Planning's seed firmer. Looks like a Keaton, but it's got sensors in the bottom that will tell you moisture and temperature, which are pretty nice things to know when you're planting corn or a lot of other crops. I mean, having that idiot light, it's like, hey, you're not in moisture. Wonderful thing. Now, the downside, I don't think I would want smart firmers on every row, because again, they've got a little juncture, a little seam in there where the components fit together. I think they're going to gather more mud. Running them on a row or two, I think it's a great idea. If you can stand one more piece of electronics. But, you know, how much does it cost you if you're not in moisture and you don't have a rain to bail you out? Tens of thousands of dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think you can afford some smart firmers. Back on, that reminds me of the complexity catastrophe we've created with all this engineering on here. Kent is telling me that there is a 27-step process he needs to go through when he pulls into a field to get everything ready to plant. It takes him 3 to 4 minutes to do all that. And that's with everything integrated through John Deere. The downforce, all that stuff is integrated. Now, you may say, wow, that's just overwhelming, can't deal with that. I don't think it has to be this hard. I mean, Deere is making it harder than it needs to be. For instance, the hydraulic downforce. I know people that run it through an ag leader system, and they say, well, no, it's pretty simple. There's a couple things you do when you pull in, you're good to go. So, I don't know. I think Deere, it's, the engineers are in charge. They know how to run the damn thing. They don't make it so a farmer can run. We're not to the stage yet where we've got iPads and phones where they're voice activated. They know what you want to do. They offer suggestions. We're certainly not to that point. We're still back maybe in the DOS era. Remember DOS prompts or, you know, something back there even before you had a mouse to move around. That's where we're at with all this technology in the cab. It's not fun, it's not user-friendly, it's stressful. But it's necessary and the rewards are there to use it. Make sure you have a good tech person that you can call, whatever you're installing. So we've firmed the seed in the bottom of the furrow. Next step is furrow closing. Well, now that we're not trying to do seed to soil contact by squashing the soil from the surface down, we're free to use more of a crumbling type action. We don't need to do a lot of squeezing. In fact, I prefer that we don't do any squeezing, none at all. The more squeezing you do trying to close that furrow, the more you're making the sidewall compaction worse. Because now you're compressing it. You're making it into an even worse brick than it was before. You want to chop that up, not compress it more. So we want something that positively goes down into the soil, chews that up, and brings it together. Back in the early 90s, a man named Walter Carroll came up with these. Originally marketed by Acra. They've been Dawn for a long time now, called the Curve Tine. This isn't the latest version. The latest one's got a little web foot in there to cut down on mud and stalks poking in there, but it performs the same in the field for what we're doing. It was an improvement over smooth rubber tires. Anything is an improvement over smooth rubber tires. Absolutely, they're a joke in no-till, and my data point that out. Leah, if you're within earshot, you could give us those handouts now, anytime. Along about that time, I said Howard Martin had the patent on the row cleaner, and there was some finagling, but he actually started selling the row cleaners then in the early 90s. And this was his wheel from the row cleaner, and he had the idea, well, we'll just put that back here on the closing bracket. And lo and behold, it works pretty well if you get them spaced far enough from the row and have these little pointy parts go in the right direction. If they're going the wrong direction, they get pretty carried away. You also got to kind of watch them. That long slender spoke will go down in there and pull seeds out if you're not careful with what you're doing. Too much pressure, too much toe out, which remember, your nose up on the planter is part of your toe out. Those things, having them too close together, they can dig seeds out. They'll do a nice job of rototilling them all out if you're not careful. This is the Schlagel wheel. It's gone through a number of design changes, none of which were any damn good. This is the only one. I have no idea how they sell these. The improved performance versus a rubber tire OEM is so small, I don't know why you would bother. And you just look at it and it's like, no, this foot is going to ride on top of the ground, it's not engaging the sidewall, it's not doing anything. The people that run these run extremely high pressure, trying to get them to do something, and I don't have pressure to spare. I can barely keep the row unit in the ground. I don't want to do that, plus it's compressing more. You get so much compression there, you're making the sidewall compaction worse, and you have more tomahawk rooting. So farther down here, May West wheel, I'm probably getting to the forbidden zone of the microphone here, but the May West wheel, Dwayne Beck helped design that. That's the plastic ones and the 4 rows on the end down there. That came out in about 95, I believe, and that was sort of the best one of the bunch at that point. But they used a sheet bearing in there that wouldn't hold together at all, and they used a cast aluminum hub which reacted terribly with phosphorus fertilizer, and the whole thing would disintegrate. I mean, literally just disintegrate. So, we were trying, people, me and others, I was doing custom seating at the time. You kept a dozen spares in your pickup, and on a rain day, that was your project, was to rebuild May West wheels, put new bearings in, the hubs disintegrated, put those together. We were so frustrated. We tried putting better bearings in. We, even went to non-mechanical bearings, everything under the sun. Couldn't get it right. The hub was bad anyway. So we're like, we need a new hub and a new bearing. At that point, you're like, why don't we just make the whole darn wheel? So that's when we started cutting we took the shape, the outline of the May West wheel, and we just torched it out of steel. And Keith and Ben Thompson were the ones that messed around with this a lot. They tried all different things. They tried curved wheels made out of all these disc blades they had laying around, which, they didn't use their tandem disc anymore, so they played with those. And like, no, those aren't any good. I want the blade. I want this thing flat. And so then they tried all different thicknesses of the flat, and I kind of told them, I like the 1/8 inch best. Too skinny, it's too much like a razor blade. Too thick, it won't go on the ground. So we made them 1/8 inch for a long time. We eventually went to 3/16. That was our X series. They seem to go on the ground almost as well, and they last longer. And then we've upgraded to higher carbon content now to get even more life out of them. So it's actually military-grade armor plating. We did not set out to exceed the May West wheel. We were like, even if it's close to as good, I'd accept 90% as good, because I'm so sick and tired of fixing their crap bearings and hubs. I just, give me something close. Well, lo and behold, it actually works better than the May West wheel, because the May West wheel, the spokes are a little bit fat. They don't want to crawl on the ground very well when it's hard down here in Kansas. So this actually penetrates better. The spoke shape tends to limit how deep they're going, which is something that you don't really have with these Martin spaders. I've always told people, if you're running these Martin spaders, remember, it's a row cleaner wheel. It wasn't really designed for this. If you have a set of these and you're trying to run them, just take a torch or a chop saw and eliminate about 3/4 of an inch off of that point. They won't dig so bad. But most of the time, if you kind of watch what you're doing, they won't dig seed out. We could dig seed out with these Exapta wheels too, especially with our toe-out wedge. So you got to pay attention. I want maximum sidewall breakage, but not pulling any seeds out. So you do have to monitor that a little. I can easily make this row look worse than anything on here by just cranking this pressure up and turning that toe out to max. Do not want to do that. So the thought on the toe out wedge, originally we wanted toe out because, the closing wheels on those Deere drills were, they're 750 drills, 1850s back in those days. They worked fairly well because they had toe out built into the arm. But these run perfectly straight to the direction of travel. So the opener blades pry the soil out. Well, now I need to reverse that. I need to pinch it back together. I don't want something running straight and making just pock marks along there. I want to actively gather that back together. So originally we were torching these 7200 brackets. You get your protractor out, you do all this stuff to create exactly 5 degrees of toe out or 4, whatever we were doing. It was a big project. But on the bolt-on brackets, which came out in, 96, probably? Whenever they went to this cast, they went to the cast design. The bolt-on ones were easy. It's like, well, you just, and Kinsey had that even before Deere, I think. Where instead of these are studs on the old 7200, this is just a bolt through there. Well, you just have basically a flat washer that's thicker on one side and thinner on the other. It's toe out. Just bolt that on the right direction. So we make these little wedges that go in there. They can give you up to 6 degrees toe out if your planter is level. If you're running nose down, you're not going to get 6 degrees. And most of the time you don't want 6 degrees. The people that think they need 6 degrees are the ones that are running nose down and you can't tell them otherwise. Like, all right. But occasionally, if you're running sod or something just really horrendous, you need more. I almost always run them at the mid position, which you turn that wedge, all right, thick part in the front, that's 6 degrees. Turn it straight up, it's nothing. Straight down, it's nothing. 45 here or here, that's 3 degrees. So I always run it in one of those positions, depending on my spacing. Tom actually changes his from corn planting to cotton and milo. When you're seeding shallow, you want those closing wheels closer together. So you rotate that wedge so that you're 45 degrees thick part pointing up, like that, to bring those wheels closer together. But then when you're doing corn, you rotate that down and it brings them back apart again. And toe out, now everybody seems to have caught on with toe out. Now everybody's got a bracket that does toe out with a lever or some sort of mechanism. I have a lot of good ideas, but I'm really lousy at getting things done sometimes. I don't know if it's too busy or I don't know. We went to Argentina in 2000. Every planter out there, every single one in Argentina has 2 levers. One that adjusts the pressure here and another lever that adjusts the toe out. It's just rotating that, since they're wider at the top, what you gotta do is rotate that a little bit. And you got to change the toe out. Every single planter had that. Monosem in Europe has had that for a while. Well, now Monosem's offering that in the U.S. Yetter, various companies have now got that where it's easily adjustable. And hey, I love it. Easily adjustable. Make my toe out wedges obsolete, please. So we're doing some R&D on a bracket or two, a couple of concepts ourselves. We're going to make toe out more readily adjustable. We won't have anything next year, so if you want that, Yetter has what looks to be like a fairly good one. You keep this bracket. Remember, your wife won't be mad. You can throw it away. You pull their piece bolts onto the bottom, causes the whole thing to raise up a little bit, which isn't bad. That's you've got toe out adjustable now, and it gives you your little lever there. So that looks, that's one of the more affordable ways of adjusting toe out. I don't know how long they last. I don't know anything about them, but of all the new ones that came to market last winter, that one looks pretty nice.
Sometimes getting those toe out wedges to stay where they belong can be hard when you're tightening them. And I've even tried using threaded bolts, first threading bolts, and it does make it easy. One side you can set down and have it stay, the other side was always a pain. So I've been stuck with
Using a tappet wrench, which we've now got a cheapy tappet wrench in our lineup that fits over that wedge. So you, with your third hand or your knee, you hold that tappet wrench where you want that wedge to be while you're tightening down. And makes that a little more user-friendly.
I've tried 2 different adjustable ones that Matt had me studying, so I still like the wedges.
Tom still likes the wedges better than the adjustable.
I like
Because you can change that gap easily, or what?
change the gap, and quickly just walking down through there that they're all set exactly the same. For me, I like to be able to look at that because I've done it for a long time, and I like to make sure that they're all set the same. That's a personal thing. It's more work. My son hates it. Hates the wedges. Hates messing with them. But he's never played it
I don't. Most of the time, for guys that aren't planting super shallow stuff like cotton, we just have it set at 3 degrees, which is 45, pointed down. We never change it, basically. We don't change it very much. But if it were adjustable, we would. Easily adjustable. More recent times, the markets gets crowded more crowded. Furrow cruisers have been around for a while. The one advantage, they're selling points is you don't have to buy the whole wheel. You just buy this little segment that bolts back into your OEM wheels. And because it's a larger diameter, you get a little more toe out anyway. Your me, right? Yeah. By raising that larger diameter wheel, you're raising that bracket up and back, which is the same as being more nose up with your planter. More nose up drops this pivot point down. So raising that up, you got more toe out. So they've got a little positive closing action even without a toe out wedge. They do fairly well. They do tend to gather a little more mud because they're kind of wide, but I don't know if it's catastrophic most of the time. One of the very latest ones to come out is SI's finger till. And when I first saw the design of this, I didn't actually have the part in my hand. I was looking at it online. I was like, well, I kind of like the looks of that. You've got some points out here that are kind of doing some crumbling. You've got these little points in there that kind of break up that little segment that you're pulling off with this ring out here. Then I got over to the seating school and was going to install them. Holy cow, these things are tremendously heavy. So it's almost a problem to get enough pressure off of them at times. I think they're okay. It's better, what do they call it? Poly twist or something. This lug or spoke here has got a little bit of a twist, which I guess is supposed to do something additional. This is the first year we've had these in the test. They haven't been out very long. Again, you're just replacing, you throw away your rubber tire. So they're a little cheaper. They seem to have worked okay in this plot. I can't really fault them. Are they better than Thompson wheels? No, I really don't think so. We've got a few other, some of these other rows have got some misadjustments and things that we'll talk about here in a moment. I think we're ready to do our little trial run here.